All right, so get ready because we're about to take a deep dive into some real-life Halloween stories that might just give you chills.
Ooh, spooky.
We're going to be looking at a YouTube video called, it's called 3 Creepy Real Trick-or-Treating Horror Stories Part 2 from the channel Mr. Nightmare.
I love that channel.
Yeah, it's a good one, and even though it might not be Halloween right now,
Right?
these stories are perfect for anyone who loves a good scare any time of year.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just something about these stories, that draws us in even when it's not Halloween.
Yeah.
It's that fascination with the unexplained, with those shadows lurking around the corner.
Right.
It's kind of a universal thing.
Oh, for sure. So let's jump right into that first story.
Okay.
We've got a 14-year-old who's taking their younger sister and some friends out trick-or-treating, right?
Yep.
It's Halloween night.
Yep.
And they come across this house. It's totally fenced off and hidden by all these overgrown trees.
Creepy.
Already you can feel the bad vibes, right?
Like you just get that feeling immediately. And that isolation like that immediately sets off those alarm bells in our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why so many horror movies start with a location that's secluded and cut off.
Yeah.
It taps into that primal fear of being vulnerable and alone.
Absolutely, and it gets even creepier.
Oh, no.
There's no doorbell, so they knock.
Okay.
And the person inside only, cracks open the door just a little bit. And they beckon the kids inside, whispering, "Come get candy."
Oh, that's not good.
No, that's not a good sign.
No.
So now we've got isolation, and we're adding in this suspicious behavior.
Right, whispering, luring children inside. I mean, those are huge red flags
Hmm.
in any situation.
Mm-hmm.
But especially on Halloween night when kids are supposed to be, safe going door to door.
Exactly.
You're supposed to be able to trust your neighbors.
Right. And the older sibling in the story totally senses something is off and yells for the kids to come back.
Okay.
Just as they do, the door slams shut.
Oh, my God.
So that instinct to protect, to sense danger,
Yeah.
it makes you think about how we all have that internal alarm system, right?
Yes, we do.
Sometimes we listen, sometimes we ignore it, and sometimes to our own peril.
Yeah, it can be scary.
But in this case, thank goodness the older sibling listened.
I know.
But here's the real kicker. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
They later find out that house has been vacant for months.
What?
So who is inside?
That's the question, isn't it?
Right. It sends chills down your spine.
Yeah, it really does.
Right.
Was it just a squatter looking for a quick thrill?
Aw.
Or was there something darker going on?
Oh,
It's so unsettling because we don't know,
we don't.
right? And so we're left to fill in the blanks ourselves.
Yeah.
And our minds naturally try to create a narrative, right?
Yeah.
And often those narratives, they lean towards our deepest fears.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it makes you wonder, what are the motivations behind these kinds of actions? What drives someone to do something like that, especially on a night when kids are supposed to be having fun?
Well, that's a question that psychologists have been grappling with for centuries.
Yeah.
There's a whole spectrum of motivations.
Yeah. Yeah.
From simple mischief
Mm-hmm.
to a deeper need for control and manipulation.
Right.
And sometimes it's that very lack of understanding, the
Yeah.
inability to categorize the behavior that makes it so terrifying.
That's a good point. It really makes you appreciate the importance of listening to your gut.
Yeah.
I mean, what if the older sibling hadn't, trusted their instincts and called those kids back?
It's a scary thought.
It is.
It really is, and it highlights how crucial it is to be aware of our surroundings, and to pay attention to those subtle cues
Yeah.
that tell us something isn't right.
Yeah,
Our subconscious is often picking up on things that our conscious mind might miss.
that's true. Okay, so on to our next story,
Okay.
which takes the idea of a Halloween prank to a whole new level.
Oh, boy.
Imagine this. You're a young man. You're home alone, handing out candy.
Okay.
It's getting late. Your parents are out, and there's a knock at the door already. You're probably feeling a little uneasy.
Oh, yeah, a little bit.
Just a little bit. And then at the door stands a tall, muscular guy in a super realistic Michael Myers costume.
Ooh, scary.
No words, no bag for candy, just pure unsettling presence.
That late night setting,
Yeah.
it taps into that primal fear of vulnerability.
Right.
Darkness has always been associated with the unknown, and our brains are wired to be more alert to potential threats when visibility is low.
Yeah.
We're naturally more on edge when our senses are limited.
Makes sense. So it's late, it's dark, and you open the door, and there's Michael Myers just staring at you.
Oh, yeah, and Michael Myers,
Yeah.
instantly we're tapping into a collective fear.
Yeah.
I mean, that image is so loaded with cultural baggage, with decades of horror movie lore.
Right.
Even if someone hasn't seen the movies,
Yeah.
there's a shared understanding of what that character represents. Pure, relentless evil.
And this Michael Myers wannabe doesn't just stand there politely. He gets offered candy steps into the house and pulls out a knife.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about a violation of boundaries.
Right.
What started as a costumed figure at the door quickly escalates into something far more threatening.
Oh, for sure.
It's a classic horror movie trope.
Yeah.
That safe space of the home being invaded.
Right.
And it plays on our deepest fears of being trapped and helpless.
Absolutely. And especially when you're home alone.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I can't even imagine you're home alone, it's late, and suddenly you're facing this, like, potential threat in your own house.
Yeah, and it's a situation that forces you to confront those primal fears.
Hmm.
You know, like our homes are supposed to be our sanctuaries,
Right.
our safe spaces. And when that sense of security is shattered, it can be so disorienting and terrifying.
Totally. And you're right. It's like a scene straight out of a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
You think you're safe at home, handing out candy, and bam, you're in a fight or flight scenario.
Exactly. And it makes you think about how thin that veil of normalcy really is, how easily it can be ripped away.
Right.
And on Halloween, we're all playing with those boundaries a bit.
Right.
We're kind of embracing the spooky and the unsettling.
Yeah.
But this story takes it way too far.
Yeah.
It crosses that line from playful scare to genuine threat.
So what happens next? Does the homeowner, try to fight back?
Well, he's frozen in fear, totally helpless.
Oh, gosh.
And that's when the Michael Myers character reveals it's all a prank.
What?
He takes off his mask. Turns out he's drunk and high and asked for candy like nothing happened.
Hold on, seriously. This guy terrorizes a homeowner knife and then expects a treat. That's messed up.
It is a messed up idea of a prank.
Yeah, what a nightmare.
And it's a perfect example of how easily things can be misconstrued. Especially when you add alcohol and drugs into the mix.
Oh, yeah.
This guy was clearly not thinking.
Yeah.
Clearly. Completely oblivious to the terror he was inflicting.
This guy's lucky the homeowner didn't, have a heart attack.
I know, right?
Or worse, defend himself. So where's the line between a harmless prank and something that could have genuinely tragic consequences?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Halloween's a tricky time because we're all expecting the unexpected.
Right.
We're primed for jump scares and creepy costumes.
Yeah.
So it creates this gray area where boundaries can be easily blurred.
Yeah, you've got people in costumes, masks, it's dark.
Right.
And then you've also got people who are more likely to be drinking or using substances, which
Yeah.
can lower inhibitions and impair judgment.
Exactly.
It's a recipe for potential disaster if people aren't careful.
It is, and it's like there's this collective agreement to suspend disbelief, to embrace the spooky and the unsettling.
Right.
But it's important to remember that real people with real feelings are behind those costumes.
Oh, absolutely.
And sometimes that sense of anonymity can embolden people to behave in ways they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, it also makes you think about how differently people perceive fear.
Right.
What one person finds funny, another might find absolutely terrifying.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And our individual anxieties, past experiences, even our cultural background,
Yeah.
it all plays a role in how we interpret and respond to these kinds of situations.
Exactly. And what might seem like a harmless prank to one person
Right.
could be a deeply triggering experience for another.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to our final story.
Okay.
It involves teenagers and an abandoned house.
Ooh.
Of course, a creepy figure.
Classic.
Two teenagers are out for one last trick-or-treating adventure, and they decide to brave the local hell house.
Oh, the one that everyone avoids.
Yeah, that one house that everyone avoids.
Right, Baze.
Abandoned places.
Yeah.
Especially those shrouded in local legends. They have a powerful pull on our imaginations, don't they?
They really do.
It's like a dare, right? You're not supposed to be haunted,
Yeah.
but you want to see for yourself.
You got to see it for yourself.
Exactly. So it's a rainy Halloween night. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation.
Okay.
And these guys are feeling that nervous excitement as they approach this crumbling old house.
Oh.
With its rusted fence and boarded up windows. Can you picture it?
Oh, yeah. I can totally picture it.
So the setting is almost cliche, isn't it?
It is. It's like rain, darkness, isolation.
Yeah.
It's like we're hardwired to respond to these environmental cues with a sense of unease.
Right.
They trigger something primal in us.
Yeah,
Sense of vulnerability and alertness to potential threats.
exactly. So they're leaving. They're feeling pretty brave for having made it that far.
Okay.
They glance up at the house and they see a figure staring at them from a window.
Oh, no.
And that image is so potent.
Right.
The sudden appearance of a figure in a place where there shouldn't be anyone.
Right.
It immediately plays on our fear of the unknown, the unseen watcher.
Yeah, and it raises so many questions.
Yes.
Who is this figure? What are they doing there? What are their intentions?
And of course, they can't get a clear look.
Right.
The details are obscured just enough to make it truly unsettling.
And it's what we don't see that often terrifies us the most, right? Our imaginations rush in to fill the void. And we often conjure up something far more frightening than reality.
Oh, for sure. So, of course, they book it out of there.
Yeah.
And guess what? They run into the figure again at the fence, reaching out towards them.
Oh, my gosh.
It's one thing to see a figure in the window, to feel like you're being watched.
Right.
But to have that figure pursue you,
Yeah.
to break that physical barrier,
Right.
that ratchets up the fear to a whole new level.
For sure.
It transforms the situation from passive observation to active threat.
Absolutely.
So they barely escape, hearts pounding.
Okay.
The next day, they talk to neighbors, and no one seems to know who could have been in the house. And there was a for sale sign
Okay.
that popped up briefly, but disappeared without a trace.
That's so strange.
So the mystery lingers, right?
It does, and that's what makes this story so compelling.
Yeah,
It leaves us with more questions than answers.
it does.
And that uncertainty can be more terrifying than any definitive explanation.
It makes you wonder, was it just a trespasser looking for shelter? Or was it something more unexplainable?
Right, and the human mind is incredibly good at finding patterns
Yeah.
and making connections even where none exist.
Mm.
We have this natural tendency to seek explanations.
Right.
Especially when we're confronted with the unknown.
Of course.
And in the absence of concrete evidence, our imaginations take over, and we start to fill in the blanks with our fears and anxieties.
Yeah, these stories are really getting to me.
I know they're pretty creepy.
I'm definitely going to be double checking all the locks tonight.
It's interesting how these stories, even though they're secondhand accounts, can evoke such visceral reactions in us.
Right.
It speaks to the power of narrative, the way our brains are wired to process and respond to stories.
Yeah, we're naturally drawn to stories, and scary stories in particular.
Right.
They seem to have a special hold on us.
Yeah, they tap into our deepest fears, our anxieties about the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
and they offer a safe space to explore those emotions without actually being in danger.
That's true. And there's also a social element to it, isn't there?
Oh, definitely.
Like sharing scary stories is a way of bonding,
Yeah,
building camaraderie, reminding ourselves that we're not alone in our fears.
exactly.
Yeah.
I wonder if these kinds of stories are more popular around Halloween because we're already in that mindset,
Right.
that
Yeah.
spooky headspace where we're more willing to suspend disbelief and entertain the possibility of the unexplainable.
Yeah, it's like Halloween gives us permission to indulge in our fears,
Right.
to confront the things that normally make us uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And in doing so, maybe we learn something about ourselves, about our capacity for fear and fascination, belief and disbelief.
I'm curious, do you think there's like a psychological benefit to engaging with these kinds of stories?
That's a good question.
Some psychologists believe that exposure to scary stories in a controlled environment can actually help us to regulate our emotions and to cope with stress and anxiety.
Interesting.
It's like a form of exposure therapy, a way of desensitizing ourselves to our fears.
That makes sense. By confronting our fears, even in a fictional context, we might just be making ourselves stronger
Right.
and more resilient in the face of real-life challenges.
Exactly. It's like building up our mental immune system,
I love that analogy.
exposing ourselves to small doses of fear so that we're better equipped to handle the bigger scares that life inevitably throws our way.
It makes me think about how these stories can also teach us valuable lessons about personal safety and awareness.
Absolutely. They remind us to trust our gut instincts,
Yeah.
to be aware of our surroundings, and to take precautions to protect ourselves.
Right.
And after all, even though these stories are fictional, they're often inspired by real-life events. And there's always something to be learned from the experiences of others.
I'm also struck by how these stories highlight the importance of boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
In each of these cases, there's a clear violation of personal space and a sense of unease that comes from those boundaries being crossed.
Boundaries are essential for our sense of safety and security.
Right.
And when those boundaries are violated,
Yeah.
whether physically or emotionally, it can trigger a cascade of negative emotions, including fear, anxiety, and anger.
It makes you think about the importance of setting clear boundaries in our own lives
Absolutely.
and respecting the boundaries of others.
Right. Boundaries are essential for healthy relationships, both personal and professional.
Right.
They help us to feel safe, respected, and in control of our own lives.
Speaking of boundaries, that Michael Myers prankster in that second story definitely crossed a major line.
He did. He really did.
It makes you wonder about the ethical implications of these kinds of pranks, especially when they involve like elements of fear and intimidation.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. You know, on the one hand, you could argue that it's all in good fun.
Right.
That it's just a harmless prank.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have to consider the impact on the victim, the potential for psychological harm, and the possibility of things going wrong.
It's like there's a responsibility that comes with wielding that kind of power. The power to evoke fear in others.
Right.
And when that power is misused, it can have serious consequences.
It's a reminder that even in the context of Halloween, when we're all playing with those boundaries a bit,
Right.
there's a line that shouldn't be crossed.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to think about the role of anonymity in these stories.
Oh, for sure.
The fact that the perpetrators are often strangers,
Right.
hidden behind costumes or lurking in the shadows.
Yeah.
It makes them all the more unsettling.
It does. And anonymity can embolden people to behave in ways they wouldn't otherwise. It can create a sense of detachment, of separation from the consequences of their actions.
Right.
And that can be incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Especially when those actions involve fear and intimidation.
You're right. It's like that sense of anonymity removes the social checks and balances that normally govern our behavior.
Exactly. And it's a phenomenon that we see play out in all sorts of contexts, from online trolling to mob mentality.
Right.
When people feel like they can act without consequence,
Yeah.
they're more likely to engage in risky or harmful behavior.
So it makes you think about the importance of accountability.
Yes.
Even in seemingly harmless situations like Halloween pranks.
Absolutely. Accountability is essential for a functioning society.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility for our actions and being held accountable for the consequences, both positive and negative.
And it's also interesting to consider the role of the storyteller in these narratives.
Oh, yeah.
These stories are often shared secondhand, passed down through friends or family members, or even posted online on platforms like YouTube.
Yeah.
How much do you think the retelling shapes the story itself?
That's a good question. The act of storytelling is inherently subjective.
Okay.
Each retelling adds a new layer of interpretation, a new perspective, a new set of emotions. And over time, those retellings can transform the story, embellishing certain details, downplaying others, and even creating entirely new elements.
It's like a game of telephone.
It is. It is.
The story changes with each retelling,
Yeah.
but the core elements remain the same. The fear, the mystery, the sense of the unknown.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even though these stories are often presented as factual accounts, they're also products of the human imagination.
Right.
And that imagination, fueled by our fears and anxieties,
Yeah.
it can shape the narrative in powerful ways.
So as we listen to these stories, it's important to remember that we're not just hearing the facts, but we're also hearing the storyteller's interpretation of those facts, filtered through their own experiences and beliefs.
Absolutely. It's crucial to engage with these stories critically, to question the source, to consider the context, and to be aware of our own biases.
These stories are raising some really thought-provoking questions. It's making me think about how our perceptions of reality can be shaped by so many factors. Our personal experiences, our cultural background, even the way stories are framed and retold.
You're absolutely right. Our perceptions of reality are not objective.
Right.
They're constructed through this complex interplay of factors, including our senses, our emotions, our memories, our beliefs, and our cultural conditioning.
It's a reminder that there's no single definitive truth, but rather a multitude of perspectives, each shaped by our own unique experiences and interpretations.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? It reminds us to be open to different viewpoints, to question our own assumptions, and to approach the world with a sense of curiosity and wonder.
These stories are also making me think about the importance of critical thinking. Yes. Especially in a world where information is so readily available and easily shared.
Critical thinking is essential in the digital age. It's about evaluating information, questioning sources, identifying biases, and forming our own informed conclusions.
We're bombarded with information from all directions.
We are.
And it's more important than ever to be able to discern fact from fiction.
Right.
To recognize propaganda and misinformation.
Yeah.
And to think for ourselves.
It's a skill that we need to cultivate in ourselves and encourage in others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm also struck by how these stories highlight the power of the unknown.
Oh, yeah.
It's the unanswered questions, the lingering mysteries that make these narratives so compelling and so unsettling.
The human mind craves certainty.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
We want to know why things happen to make sense of the world around us.
Right.
And when we're confronted with the unknown,
yeah.
with events that defy explanation,
right.
it can trigger feelings of fear, anxiety, and even existential dread.
But it can also spark curiosity, can it?
Oh, for sure.
That desire to understand, to solve the mystery.
Yeah.
It can be a powerful motivator.
Absolutely. The unknown can be both terrifying and exhilarating. It's the source of our greatest fears and our most profound discoveries.
Right.
It's what drives us to explore, to question, and to push the boundaries of human knowledge.
These stories are a reminder that there's still so much we don't know.
Yeah.
So much that remains hidden and unexplained.
Right.
And that's what makes life so fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
The possibility of discovery, the thrill of the unknown, the never-ending quest for answers.
It's about embracing the mystery, acknowledging the limits of our understanding, and cultivating a sense of humility in the face of the vastness of the universe.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into real-life Halloween chills, what are some key takeaways for our listener?
Well, I think these stories offer valuable lessons about personal safety awareness and the importance of trusting our instincts.
They also highlight the power of suggestion, the way our imaginations can shape our perceptions,
Right.
and that delicate balance between playful scares and genuine threat.
Absolutely. And perhaps most importantly, they remind us that even in a world that seems increasingly rational and predictable, there's still room for mystery, for wonder, and for the unexplainable.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
Exactly. And that's where critical thinking comes in. It's not about dismissing these stories outright, but rather engaging with them thoughtfully, asking ourselves, what are the possible explanations? What evidence is there to support those explanations? And what does this tell us about ourselves? About our relationship with fear and the unknown?
I think that's a great point to leave our listener with today.
Yeah.
We've unpacked some spooky stories, explored the psychology of fear, talked about the power of suggestion. But ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide how they interpret these experiences, what lessons they take away, and how they navigate the world with a healthy balance of curiosity and caution.
Well said. Remember, even though these stories are rooted in real-life experiences, they're also filtered through the lens of the storyteller.
Right.
So as you move through the world, be observant, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to ask questions.
And if you do happen to find yourself trick-or-treating past a creepy old house with a for sale sign that mysteriously appears and disappears, maybe just keep walking.
That's probably a good rule of thumb. But hey, if you're feeling brave, you could always try knocking on the door.
Oh, yeah.
Just make sure you have your escape route planned.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring the depths of the unknown.
Right. It just goes to show you that you never really know what's out there.
You really don't, and that's what makes these stories so fascinating and a little bit terrifying.
The unknown can be both intriguing and unsettling at the same time.
So for our listeners out there, what do you think are some of the key takeaways from these creepy encounters?
Well, I think the most important one is to always trust your gut instinct.
Yeah, something feels off. It probably is.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to remove yourself from a situation that makes you uncomfortable.
That's good advice, not just for Halloween, but for life in general.
Definitely. And another thing to remember is that our perceptions can be easily influenced.
Oh, yeah, especially in those heightened emotional states.
Right. Like when you're scared or excited, your mind can play tricks on you.
So it's important to stay grounded and to try to think critically even when things seem spooky.
And to be aware of the power of suggestion.
Those urban legends and ghost stories, they can definitely shape the way we see things.
So even though it's fun to get caught up in the Halloween spirit, it's also important to maintain a healthy dose of skepticism.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these creepy trick-or-treat encounters, What's the final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it's this: even in a world that's increasingly focused on logic and reason, there's still a place for mystery and wonder.
That's a beautiful thought, and it's a good reminder that sometimes the most intriguing stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it all, isn't it?
Well said. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring the shadows.
Happy haunting, everyone.